Good morning and welcome to John's Rants. Most of the time we do these rants by tape. Today I've decided that it would be fun, I don't know how much fun, we'll find out, to do it live. So we're going to jump right into questions. What we did is we asked that people send us questions ahead of time. We've gotten a whole bunch, probably more than we thought, and if we have time, we'll get to your live questions as well. So I'm going to jump right in. We have a question from an agent, and it's a fairly typical question. It is basically, how may a listing agent, now under current law called a seller's agent, how may a listing agent best handle an offer from a cooperating broker when, based on prior transactions or prior knowledge, you're aware that there could be some liability because of either professional competence or negative ethical behavior? And that is a great question. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're right and that you know, not just because of hearsay, that the person has been a problem. If that's true, then you must remember that under Article 1, your primary obligation is to protect your client. You have an obligation to present all the offers that come in to your clients unless your clients have instructed you otherwise, and so you want to be careful to not ignore those offers, but to make sure that your client is fully aware of any offer that comes in. Having said that, the same problem occurs in my practice. We'll have a case, and when a case comes in, I'll check an attorney's website. I'll take a look at the public records at the state bar, in your case, the Department of Real Estate. Check around, maybe go to the California Association of Realtors site to see if there's anything been published about them, or if I happen to know, because of prior experience with that lawyer, that the lawyer will either make problems more complicated, doesn't really have the knowledge that would be necessary to try and solve the problem, or work together towards a common resolution. At that point in time, I will sit down with my client and I will explain to them as clearly as I can, look, we're going to have some issues here. I'm going to have to do a lot more work than I thought I was going to have to do because the attorney on the other side, in your case, the agent on the other side, simply doesn't have the experience or the knowledge or the willingness to learn to do things properly. They don't return phone calls. They aren't familiar with the forms. Or worst case scenario, they simply don't have a good ethical behavior. If that's the case, maybe your client is going to tell you, well, then let's look at other offers. So it's going to depend on the circumstances, but the reality is that periodically we're going to deal with people that are lesser than we are in terms of either ethics and or competency, and we're going to have to make up for it so that we protect our clients and, of course, protect ourselves and our companies. We also want to make sure we're not those people. That we are clear on what the forms are, what the requirements are, what the time elements are, and those kinds of issues. So protect yourselves. Obviously, make sure you understand who you're dealing with. Take a minute or two to kind of do some background checks, but periodically you're going to have to deal with people that simply are not up to par. NAR did a study a couple of years ago, and in terms of what are the dangers to organized real estate, and they concluded that among all of the different issues, the technology and all of the other kinds of things you've all been talking about, marginal agents are probably the single most difficult problem that quality brokers have to deal with. So you're going to have to deal with them, protect your clients, document your file, and do the best that you can. We're going to be talking about this issue. I thought it was a critically important issue and a great question. So we're going to be talking about that at the upcoming brown bags that I'll tell you about in a few minutes, and also upcoming risk management programs. All right. The next question has to do with what dates do we place on certain documents. This particular question asked, what dates do we place on the lead-based paint disclosure? Do we use the date the contract is prepared, or do we use the date of acceptance? And the answer is neither. Basically, you have dates in your transactions. The date prepared on the RPA is frankly not very significant. It's simply exactly what it says. It's the date I write up an offer. Rarely, although sometimes the offer is going to be accepted that date, but most of the time you're going to present an offer. It's going to either go back and forth or someone's going to get back to you. At some point in time, hopefully, your offer is accepted or the counter offers are accepted. That moment in time when all of the counter offers have been resolved and all the addendums have been agreed to, now you have a contract. That's the date of acceptance. That's the date that you count everything from. If you look at your contract, it says day after acceptance. So the 17 days is counted as day one. So let's say, for example, today is July 12th, and we enter into an agreement today. Tomorrow, July 13th, is day one for all purposes, whether it's calendar day counting or whether it's business day counting. You count all days to whatever the conclusion date is, 17 days, 21, 45 for close. As far as the specific question here about the day that I the date that I put on the form, that is the day that you sign the form. So for example, the specific question here had to do with the lead-based paint disclosure. Well, I'm going to write up that disclosure. Contract says I have to provide it to the buyer within the first 7 days after acceptance, unless you've picked some other time. So we're going to fill this all out, whenever that is. Could be even before the contract has been prepared, because maybe you filled out some of these forms ahead of time and you've provided them, or they've been provided to you for presentation to a prospective purchaser. Whatever the date is that I sign that form, that's the date that goes on the form. And so it's as simple as that, not very complicated, and just make sure your dates are accurate. The real critical date, though, of course, is going to be the contract date, because everything gets counted after that. All right, I've got a series of questions here from one person, but I broke them up into 3 separate questions, so let me jump in and tell you what this agent asked us about. First question is a very interesting, fairly common question, which has to do with the fact that the real estate laws and the NAR Code of Ethics apply to realtors. We all understand that. This question is, what about people like for sale by owners, some of the companies that are not necessarily realtors that are coming into your business? How are they governed? And I think that's a great question. And the answer is, it depends on who has jurisdiction. If you are a real estate licensee, then the Department of Real Estate has jurisdiction over your license. If you are a realtor who is also a member of the multiple listing service, then you are governed by both the Department of Real Estate as a licensee, but also by the Code of Ethics and by the MLS rules. If you are an MLS only member, then of course you are governed by the Code of by the MLS rules and by the Department of Real Estate regulations. If you are not in that capacity, but somehow are involved in the transaction, for example, as a for sale by owner, you're governed by basic California law. Just because you aren't governed by the Code of Ethics, just because you may not have a license, doesn't mean that there are not significant laws that govern your behavior. Laws and or case law dealing with requirements for disclosure, for truthfulness, for those kinds of things are going to govern your behavior. Also the contracts itself. If you're entering into an RPA contract, then the contract and the language in the contract is going to govern your behavior. So it depends on who we're talking about. Lots of times we'll get questions about the behavior of a seller or the behavior of a person who is involved in the transaction but is not necessarily a realtor and therefore not obligated to comply with the Code of Ethics. And so it's just going to depend on who that person is. But we always have federal law, we always have California law, so regardless of what licenses or memberships the person has, there's going to be some way that person's behavior is going to be governed. At the end of the day, if it's simply a contractual and or a disclosure issue, then it's going to be governed either by an arbitrator, a mediator, or 12 people sitting in a jury box. But somebody is going to hold somebody accountable. The next question is, has to do with the forms and what happens if someone is not using a approved California Association of Realtor form. And again, that does periodically come up. My response to that is, number one, I have tremendous confidence in the California Association of Realtor forms most of the time. Obviously, there's things about forms that I would like to see changed, things that I would think could be maybe modified a bit. But overall, I think these forms are outstanding. They're written by two of the best lawyers that I've come in contact with over my career. They're thoughtful. They're absolutely brilliant legal minds. The forms are all worked on by an excellent group of realtors known as the Forms Committee. And so these forms are heavily vetted, heavily thought through. And I personally think that the contract forms, the forms that go with the contract, all of that are forms that should be used. If you are dealing with a form you are not familiar with, or a form that a private individual has come up with, then obviously it's incumbent upon you to make sure you become familiar with that form. If you have the ability to ask that the forms be modified, then certainly you can do that. So it just depends on the form. Sometimes they're going to use an AIR type form, or they're going to use a form that their own lawyers prepared or something like that. You need to make sure, number one, that the form is compliant with what needs to be done. Number two, you may want to check it against the CAR forms to make sure that everything that should be in the form is included in the form, and just generally that the form is sufficient. But again, wherever you can, confirm that the form is going to be a CAR form. If you're the seller's agent, you can require that in your comments. Simply indicate that all offers shall be on the most current California Association of Realtor form, that all of the forms that will be utilized, unless there's a special type of a local disclosure or a special type of a company form or advisory, that all the forms will be based on CAR type forms if you're the person that has that control. Now, the next third question that this person asked has to do with marketing directly to consumers who have had their listings expire. And I will tell you, we've had several of these questions. This is just one of probably 3 or 4 questions dealing with advertising issues. So let me touch, first of all, on this specific question. Ed Zorn, who is an absolutely phenomenal lawyer, is the attorney, along with Jeff Smetana, for CRMLS, and these are two of the finest lawyers that I know. And they have put together a video. They've done as much work as you can possibly do to try and get you to understand that Rule 12.11 is at stake here. Rule 12.11 and pretty much basic California law and most of the other laws make it clear that the purpose of the multiple listing service is to provide a mechanism to share information about properties that are available for sale and or for rent. Secondarily, to make offers of compensation to people who procure a ready, willing, and able buyer. While both of those issues have lots of questions and lots of other issues, that's the basic purpose of a multiple listing service. It is not to provide you with a mining capability so that you can obtain information about expired listings. The problem is, of course, a number of things. The public doesn't like it. We've heard lots of comments and lots of concerns registered by members of the public that they are inundated with telephone calls, inundated with all kinds of information from people who have said, hey, look, we understand that your listing has expired. We think we can do a great job for you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, we've actually heard that people have gotten so troubled by that they've actually pulled their properties off of the market because of the concern. And so while I understand that there are ways you can do that legally, that getting it from the MLS is not one of those ways. And while your coaches, while your other contacts may tell you differently, you need to listen to what Ed and Jeff are saying, or any other MLS provider. They're making it clear that that is not something that you can do that would be legal. There's also another problem. If you call me and you have not been invited to do so, which obviously if you're doing cold calling or robocalling or something like that, based on any information you get, whether it's from the MLS or from any other source, and I happen to be on the do not call list, you've just committed a federal offense that is punishable by a fine. There is currently pending a class action lawsuit in California, and one also filed in Florida. And the thrust of those two class actions is to deal with robocalling and robo-texting, where people are simply calling clients or prospective customers to find out if the property is still available for listing, for sale. There are other ways you can do that, but if you get a hold of somebody inappropriately because you've mined them through the MLS, or you call somebody or you text somebody who is on the do not call list, you open yourself up to some very serious problems. Got a question here about an agent who put a listing out, and then apparently someone put it on Craigslist, and now they're getting phone calls. Had this happen before. It's a very difficult problem. What you need to do, very simply, is you need to, number one, find out, if you can, where the source of that information is coming from. Where did the person who's knocking on the door, making the phone call, where did they get information indicating that a property that is now on Craigslist that is actually for sale on the MLS is, quote, for rent? Because it is susceptible to a fraud. It is obviously not what the owner of the property has authorized, and it's a violation of ethical standards. It's a violation of California law. It's a violation of perhaps privacy issues, and certainly the MLS. So try to get as much information as you can. Contact Lori Smith here at the board. Let her know what you have found out. We'll take a look at it because it has happened before. We've had some situations where we've had to go after particular people because, again, this is your association. This is your multiple listing services. These are your listings, and these are your clients. And whatever we need to do to help you protect them, the association is prepared to do that, either by guiding you into what could be a remedy, by going after those people if we have jurisdiction because of ethical or because of MLS rule violations, or something else. So first step is to report it. Find out from Lori what you can do. Talk to anybody you can talk to. Get as much information as you can, but don't leave it sit, because I will tell you, we've run across situations where actual business models were put together to deal with this kind of issues, where they will mine things, take them and put them on Craigslist, even if the property is for rent. And if you've not authorized it to be put on Craigslist, that can be a significant problem. So take it seriously and do what you can. Speaking of fraud, many of you are aware that this association has recently dealt with an incredibly serious fraud, and we took a very aggressive position. The person who allegedly, because she's still not been convicted, allegedly committed these frauds is under indictment, as I understand it presently, for 11 felony counts. But as we've been told, there may be other people who allegedly have been defrauded by this person. And so whenever you're uncomfortable that something doesn't seem right, or you've done your homework and things don't add up, you need to report that somewhere. You can always start here at the association. It's nationally ranked one of the finest professional standards associations in the nation. You can report it to Lori. You can, if necessary, we can talk to the Department of Real Estate. We can, in some cases, talk to the district attorney. Whatever we have to do, because if fraud is being committed, it not only affects you and your client, it affects the whole public. And people get injured. For some people, X amount of dollars may be painful, but not threatening. For other people, the amount of money that these people take can be devastating and could actually ruin financial lives. We've seen that happen over the years with some devastating effects. And so the best way you deal with any fraud, whether it's a Craigslist fraud, whether it's an outright fraud, whether it's an elder abuse scam, whether it's a mortgage fraud, whatever kind of a situation comes up, and they are very creative. These are not people who think like you and I think. These are very creative people. And if they come up with a way to take advantage, someone needs to go after them as quickly as possible. Obviously, the district attorney is going to be concerned because they have to prove things beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. We have a different standard. Our biggest issue is going to be, number one, do we have jurisdiction over that person? Is it something that we can do? And if so, then we will do whatever we can. We have incredible cooperation from the multiple listing service. We work together whenever we can. Obviously, they have their rules, we have ours, but many of these rules mesh together very, very well. And we both have the same interest, which is to protect the membership, to protect the public, and to protect, frankly, the integrity of organized real estate and the public marketplace.
John, we have a question from Renee Sanchez.
Go ahead.
He said, can you advertise coming soon signs directing to a coming soon listing?
Coming soon signs. Gosh, we never hear those kinds of questions, do we? Couple of things about coming soon signs. First of all, if you want to read about coming soon signs or any other advertising issue, go to Pacific West's website, click on the Professional Standards button, scroll down to Advertising Guidelines, and download them. There's about 29 pages of information that one of the members of my law firm put together. I got a chance to edit it, but Ashley Richardson did a great deal of the work. She did an absolutely fantastic job. We asked both the MLS and the Department of Real Estate to take a look at it. Ashley updates it as recently as a couple of weeks ago to make sure that we take advantage of anything anyone else might write. For example, we just updated the Coming Soon section because the Department of Real Estate and the National Association of Real Estate came up with some issues. So take a look at the Coming Soon sign section, but then also take a look at the teams advertising your signs. There's a whole, I think there's 11 page paragraphs or 11 sections dealing with advertising, and I think, frankly, I'm very proud of it, that my name is part of it. But I got to give credit where credit is due, and that's primarily to Ashley and the work that she did. So having said that, coming soon signs, it's behavior-based. I take your listing. You're not quite ready to have people come in and go through your house. Maybe you're going to stage. Maybe you're going to go on an extended vacation and you want to be home, or you want to at least be around. Maybe there's some work to be done on the house. Maybe there's something you're recovering from or about ready to go into that may be more important, frankly, than getting the house ready. But you want to get together with a realtor and let people know that that the property is going to be on the market active fairly soon. I kind of analogize it to when my wife and I went to the movies not too long ago. Before the main feature came on, we watched previews of coming attractions. Can't see the movie, don't know a lot about it other than a few snippets, but at least I'm now curious about and maybe interested in seeing that movie at a later time. And that is purely stated what a coming soon sign is. It's a property that has been listed but is not yet active. It is on hold. Thanks to some work done at CRMLS, you're not going to get dinged if the property hasn't gone active for the days on market analysis. On the other hand, it is simply a way to help market a property that will become available for sale at some future date. Usually a fairly soon, hence the name coming soon, date. Now, that's perfectly appropriate, absolutely provided by the rules, totally ethical. The Department of Real Estate and the association are going to be interested in one overriding question, which is, have you clearly gone through those kinds of issues with your client so that this is a way that the client has approved to help pre-market or market properties that they're not quite ready to start getting bids, offers on. If you're doing it for yourself because you're trying to develop a list to double end the transaction, you may end up with some serious problems down the line with both the Association of Realtors and with the Department of Real Estate. Now, having said that, now how do we cross the line? Well, we cross the line by doing exactly what I just said. It's really not a coming soon sign. It's a subterfuge. It's a way to get people to call you. This last year, when we were training the professional standards hearing officers, we gave them a hypothetical. And in that hypothetical, we talked about the fact that I have a listing, I put it on as a coming soon, and no problem. However, 6 months later, when someone is interested in talking about that, or even 2 months later, or 1 month later, it really doesn't matter. And language like, well, you're not the first offer, this isn't the first call we've got. Now you're starting to wonder, what's that agent really up to? Is it really a coming soon sign because the market is really hot, or I want to take advantage of the market because this property is going to fit into a certain niche, or all of the things you guys do? That's perfectly okay. But if I'm doing it to benefit myself, then I've got a problem. I've got a potential breach of fiduciary duty to my client, because if I'm doing it specifically to try and double end the deal myself and get both sides of the commission, that may not necessarily be in my client's best interest because I'm not getting the best price on the best terms. I'm only getting a limited view of the market, somewhat like looking at a parade through a knothole. Number two, I may be dealing with a situation where I may be violating the Code of Ethics, Article 1, Article 3, dealing with the duties I have to my client, dealing with cooperation with other agents, and of course, Article 12, I'm violating the advertising articles because I'm not being truthful in my advertising. There are a myriad of MLS rules that I also could be violating, and of course, those rules will be part of any ethics complaint. So you've got the Department of Real Estate, you've got the Association of Realtors, potentially the multiple listing service, and of course, at the end of the day, if your client doesn't believe they've gotten full price for the property, they're going to file a lawsuit against you for breach of fiduciary duty, for attorney's fees, and for any other damages that they've sustained, including interest on the money that you got. Simply not worth it. Don't take the risk. Do it correctly. Learn the rules. Read Ashley's guidelines. Understand. Ask questions. Do it the right way. Because at the end of the day, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your client most importantly, and you're hurting the reputation of every other realtor, because people are watching and they hear these stories and then they project it out to other realtors. Is that the question?
Yeah, that's his question.
Anything else you want to?
Sure. We've heard that there's a change that's coming to the RPA contract.
Yeah, there are actually. The question is, in case you can't hear, Lori, my wonderful, beautiful assistant who's sitting over here off camera. The California Association of Realtors has decided that it's time that they take a good hard look at the residential purchase agreement. It hasn't been significantly modified for a very long time. As I've been told, of course, everything is open to change, and things may take place between now and when it's supposed to happen. But the goal is to have a brand new RPA out in December 2020, so a little over a year and a half from now. They're talking about the changes. They've gone online. They are open to comments, things that you think need to be changed, things that maybe need to be added, things that could be done better, things that could flow better. Maybe they're done correctly now, but maybe moved around a little bit so that it flows a little bit better, that it follows the transaction a little more clearly. And so that is going to happen. And I suspect when that happens, we're going to take a look at a lot of the forums. So it's going to be a lot of action a year from now, a lot of explanation, a lot of classes, a lot of learning. It's going to be a lot of fun, just like it was all those years ago when they changed the contract from passive removal of contingencies to active removal of contingencies. And so that's going to happen. So if you've got issues, if you've got things you don't like about the contract, or things you like would like to be added to the contract, or things you'd like to be clarified in the contract, let us know. Send me an email. I'll get it over to the people that are doing the drafting. Send Lori an email. She'll get it over to me, and we'll make sure that the people that are doing this take a look at it. Some of the things that they're talking about right now, and again, understand this so there's no misunderstanding, nothing has been decided. All they are doing now is exploring the possibilities. So I want to make it absolutely clear. But some of the suggestions, for example, have been, we have 9 potential contingencies in the RPA. And so maybe we ought to have one place like we do with all the addendums and all the advisories, so that they're all listed in one place. They can be repeated in a more appropriate place, but have all the contingencies in one place so that they can all be checked off and dealt with at one time. They've talked about moving some other things around so that things flow a little bit better. And again, all of that's going to be hopefully for the benefit of the agents and their clients, so that things will flow just a little bit better. But that's probably going to happen, I suspect. And the people that are working on it are, again, some of the finest lawyers I've ever worked on. So I have absolute confidence that when it gets to the point where they're going to start releasing drafts, probably sometime next year, and we start taking a look at these drafts, number one, we're going to have ample opportunity to comment. You're going to have ample opportunity to comment. But I think at the end of the day, they're going to be fabulous changes, and you're going to be very pleased. Anything else, Lori?
Well, one of the most common questions I receive is, how do I know the listing agent has presented my offer?
So the question is, how do I know that the listing agent has presented my offer? Well, that's a common problem. It's been a common problem. It's a really unfortunate problem. It is, according to what I've been told right now, at the Department of Real Estate, one of the top complaints. A member of the public has found out that his property was sold. Later on, he finds out that there were other offers that he never, or she or they never received, that were for more money or on terms that were more favorable, and that at the end of the day, it was the listing real estate agent, the office, or however it worked out. Maybe there was some work with some friends, however it happened, but it wasn't in their best interest, and they'll file a complaint. And this also affects you. It affects your ability to serve your clients. It hurts the industry tremendously, and it affects sellers and buyers. And of course, at the end of the day, it does affect your ability to make a living, because you're working to try and present offers, and you're working diligently, and you make an offer, you put a lot of thought into it, you've strategized how to make it work best, and now all of a sudden you never hear another word. Well, there have been some changes to the Code of Ethics, and you need to be aware of it. Article 1, which says you put your client's interest first, you do everything you can to protect their interest, and you are honest with everyone else. In that article are standards of practice. And one of those standards of practice is Article 1, Standard of Practice 1-7. It was a proposed change that actually came out of California, and a number of tremendously fine realtors worked on some suggested changes. They got it through. The California Association of Realtors presented it to NAR as a proposed change. NAR approved it, and it became effective on January the 1st. So here's the deal. As of today, as of January the 1st, actually, if you send an offer to a cooperating or listing agent as a cooperating agent, you should do one quick thing. You should send a cover letter that says, please let me know within a relatively short period of time, 1 business day, no more than 2, that my offer has been presented to the seller, and please make that response in writing. If the listing office fails to respond either with an affirmative statement in writing that they have in fact presented your offer to the seller, which doesn't mean the seller is going to accept the offer, certainly, or they have provided you with a writing from the seller themselves saying, we have decided not to accept any further offers because we're sufficient, or however they say it. If that happens, if that doesn't happen, that alone is a current violation of the Code of Ethics. What you should do, contact Lori. She'll send you a complaint, and you should file a complaint against the listing office that did not respond in writing. At that moment in time, we have a violation of the Code of Ethics. The only way you're going to start going after these people that are doing this, that are acting in a manner that is detrimental to their own client, and in any other way that is inappropriate, is to file complaints. Lori doesn't have a posse out there looking for people. We don't have investigators looking for people. Only through your experience can we be told what is going on out there. And if you're not going to file complaints, then there's a problem. I was with about 30 realtors yesterday, and I asked, first question, have any of you ever had experience with an unethical agent? Everyone in the room raised their hand. Not untypical. I think statistics say 70 to 80% of you have had transactions with unethical agents. I asked the next question, how many of you have actually gone to the step of filing a complaint? And one person raised her hand. That in and of itself says a lot about why these people continue to get away with what they're getting away with. There are some people right now, some really good people, working on best practices. Obviously, this went into effect. Nobody knew it was going to go into effect, and so there's still obviously going to be some unanswered questions. What should the letter look like? Right now, there is a letter. It's a demand. It's a letter that's on your zip form program that talks about a demand to present offers that can be modified. I suspect at some juncture we'll see a form letter that you could actually modify and use. But right now there is a letter you can play with. But this is a letter to confirm your offer had been presented, but it comes later. So you want to modify that and send it with your offer. Secondly, there may be some issues because the offer is one thing, but what about counter offers? What about multiple offers? And so people are working on trying to come up with some best practices, and we'll keep you posted, and we'll make sure you're aware of whatever happens. But for right now, very simple. You send an offer, you ask for written confirmation in writing. If you don't get it back in writing within a relatively short period of time, if you want to make a phone call, find out what's going on, you can. Hopefully the agent has a reasonable explanation. But if they don't, or if they simply don't respond to you, then you file your complaint. If you don't file your complaint, then frankly, if it happens to you again, you have no one to blame but yourself. Okay? Lori, anything else?
Yes.
I got a bunch of questions here too that came in I want to talk about.
Why don't you do yours and then we'll come back to me.
No, go ahead. You got something?
From Gary Sharma. Will there ever be a rule where each side must be represented by their own agent for each transaction?
Great question. Wow. Okay, that takes the rest of the time I have. The question is there ever going to be a time where we have a requirement that both agents are represented separately? And obviously, that is a topic for a lot of conversation, pro and con. California allows dual agency by law. Civil Code Section 2079 says that you are to provide an agency disclosure. Obviously, the Code of Ethics talks about your duties under the law to represent both parties as a fiduciary. And, of course, as an agent representing both sides, you have fiduciary duties to both sides. Fiduciary duty can also come up if your office is representing both sides. We had a case come down not too long ago called Haricki versus Caldwell Banker that held that. So the question is, will there ever be a rule that says you can't do that an office can't represent both sides or an agent can't represent both sides? And I will tell you, while it's still okay in California, all but about 8 states have banned the practice. Some states allow for dual agency in the context that I can represent the seller and another agent in the office can represent the buyer. The broker still is going to have some form of dual agency depending upon how the state handles that law, but I cannot represent concurrently both sides to a transaction. Other states have banned the practice outright. I have to go to an entirely different office as a buyer. I can never use the listing office. That interferes to a certain degree with what the buyer may want to do. I may want to use that office. I may want to even use that agent. So it's not that clear cut. Certainly, as we've talked about today, there are a lot of problems with dual agency, but the problems aren't with the law. The problems are with the behavior of some unethical people who think that the transaction is about them and not about their clients. Because if it's about your client, you're going to do the right thing. You're going to protect your client. If you're representing both sides to the transaction, you're going to figure out how to protect both people. But I've seen many situations where I say I'm a dual agent, but I'm really favoring the seller. Or I'm really worried about my own commission and I'm going to cut corners or something like that. So will the rule go away? I don't know. We have a very pro-consumer legislature right now, and I don't see that changing in the short term, certainly maybe even in the long term. And at some juncture, they may take a look at dual agency. Right now, they're looking at rent control, they're looking at independent contractor, certainly looking at taxation, pardon me. But whether they'll look at this issue, there was a bill before the legislature not too long ago to ban dual agency in certain commercial or lease transactions, and I did make it out of committee, but people were looking at it, and so we'll see down the road what happens. If the abuses continue, people are going to be shooting themselves in the foot, and who knows, maybe the legislature will take an action. And of course, the California Association of Realtors Phenomenal Lobbyists will jump in and do what they can to soften the blow, but we'll have to wait and see.
That's it for now.
That's it for now? All right, well, let me see what else I've got cooking here. Had a couple of other questions that came in over the last couple of days. Talked about coming soon signs already. There's a couple of those questions. Topic of sexual harassment came up, and obviously this is a topic for a 2-hour conversation because the topic has become such a front burner question. So it does affect real estate. Number one, if you're a broker, you need to make sure that your policy manual clearly reflects not only California law, dealing with investigations and retaliation and the kinds of things that you need to do if someone brings to your attention some type of a sexual harassment, an unwelcome sexual advance in your workplace. There's also now NAR has come up with some policy changes that reflect on a realtor's behavior, either toward the opposite sex or toward the same sex, but in an unwelcome manner. And so that needs to be taken into consideration. The association itself has restrictions that if you were to come in and harass a member of the staff, either sexually or in some other harassing way, which creates a hostile work environment, we're going to take action. We're either going to investigate it and come after you directly, or we're going to send it to grievance and see if it's an ethical or a member duty violation. You need to make sure you get the training taken care of. If you have more than 5 people, including agents, you need to do at least 1 hour of training. My strong suggestion is you do the full 2-hour program. Above all, take the training seriously. These lawsuits are huge. The cost of defending them are outrageous. The damage to the person who's been victimized is significant. Potentially, the damage to the person who is accused can be significant because of the reputation issues. And so there's just a lot going on in that arena. I'm sure I've missed up on some things. There's some new laws that affect realtors out there doing business with their clients. Of course, if they take sexual advantage of a client in some way, there could be both civil and ethical and DRE repercussions from that. There are codes of ethics violations if you take an action that indicates that you're discriminating based on sex or sexual orientation or something like that. There could be action taken against you on an ethical level. And remember, if you're found guilty of a violation of the code of ethics, obviously, not obviously, but in the way that you do business and or in the way you hire people, that's going to be reported to the Department of Real Estate as a violation of public trust. So sexual harassment is a really hot topic right now. And so I would strongly urge that you get an idea of what's going on out there, because, my goodness gracious, if you take some steps that affect somebody, you're going to be in some serious trouble. And you need to understand that whatever you think might be the rules or whatever you think might be appropriate behavior, or I was just joking, or I didn't really mean anything by it, that we're in a brave new world out there right now. People are not required to put up with this kind of stuff any longer. Obviously, we need to make sure that the claims are legitimate, that we need to make sure that people aren't being accused unjustly. But having said that, if someone is guilty of some form of sexual harassment, whether it be language or by touching or by demanding favors in exchange for something else, it's called quid pro quo, or something along those lines, or that they're being improperly stared at, or lewd remarks are being made, that there are consequences now, and those consequences can be devastating. I was asked a question in this very large, incredibly intelligent pile of questions about electronic signatures. And again, I'm going to touch upon this at our next brown bag because it's become such a hot topic. Because electronic signatures in and of themselves are perfectly okay. Both the federal and the state governments several years ago both indicated that electronic signatures, if done correctly and on documents that have not been carved out for original wet type signatures, are perfectly appropriate because, frankly, it is a boon to the electronic business model that a lot of businesses are now following. But with that come a lot of other issues. Obviously, there needs to be consent. Having said that, here's the issues that I see. Number one, you need to make sure your client understands what electronic signatures are, that when they sign that document or those documents, it's as good as their regular signature, that they need to know what they're signing. One of the big issues that came up, one of the past presidents here at Pacific West uses the term abdication of your responsibility, that you'll send a document over, you'll ask that it be initialed, signed, and then sent back to you, and where does it show that you actually went over that document, that the client understands what they're signing, that the client understands what that means and what the impact of all that's going to be. And so the phrase abdication of responsibility is absolutely appropriate. I thank Barbara for coming up with that term because it's really a significant term. And so you need to be aware that you still have an obligation to discharge your fiduciary duty. I've seen that agents do it in all sorts of different ways. Send the stuff ahead of time. Tell them to read it over. Send the other forms. For example, if you're going to ask them to sign and fill out a transfer disclosure statement, send them to disclosure advisory ahead of time. Tell them to read it over so they understand how to fill out that form. Do those kinds of things. I just completed a transaction myself, and it was in another state. And everything that I signed, I signed electronically. But I got the stuff from my broker ahead of time. Because I wasn't familiar with the forms. I'm familiar with most of the law, and I'm familiar with the way things are done. I'm at a little different stage, perhaps, than, say, a first-time home buyer that's never bought a house before, that's never bought a house in a particular state. I guess in that context, I was a first-time home buyer, but I felt a little more comfortable. But I still got the stuff in advance. I went over it, I asked questions, and then I would sign. And it was wonderful because I didn't have to fly back to the state. I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to do all those sorts of things. I could handle things remotely, which is the way much business is taken care of today. But you need to be aware of what's going on with these electronic signatures. Technology is going to have an enormous impact. Barbara Betts hosted a panel of us at the last CAR convention dealing with risk management issues and the emerging technology. And so we're going to be talking about that at some upcoming brown bags, some upcoming legal panels. The exciting part about being your association attorney and the attorney for the brokerages that I represent is that even though I've been doing this for a while, so much is fresh and new and requires constant learning. And so as we see these kinds of issues emerging, new technologies which are going to be happening at a record pace, as we see new ways of doing things, new people coming in with better mousetraps or different mousetraps, we're going to have to make those adjustments. Change is going to be ever occurring, and it's here to stay. Anything else, Lori?
Yes, we have a question from Chris Lechner. On a 1 to 4 unit sale, do you need a TDS and an SPQ for all the units or just one for the entire building?
Yes. Here's the answer. First of all, let's take an issue that came up in my practice not too long ago. The issue has to do with the transfer disclosure statement, and as you know, it's mandatory. It cannot be waived by contract unless the transaction is somewhat exempt. If you have a 1 to 4 unit, then you need to do a transfer disclosure statement. That came up in my practice in a situation where the client was selling a piece of property that was inherently commercial. It was a veterinary facility that had a hospital, other post-operative care facilities, and those kinds of things. But it also had a single-family caretaker's cottage on the property. Did a little research, a couple of cases out there, Richmond versus Hartley, and a couple of other cases that say, look, what you need to do is you don't need to do transfer disclosure statements on the commercial property, but on any residential property, 1 to 4, you need to do a TDS. The cases are pretty clear. The law just changed on January the 1st so that it's pretty clear now that you only need to do the TDS on the units. So to answer the question, if you've got a 1 to 4, if you look at the documents, it's pretty clear that even though there's common property, each unit is a separate unit, and you should do a separate TDS, a separate SPQ, and a separate AVID form for all of the properties. I think that's just good common sense. Obviously, a lot of it's going to be exactly the same, but there may be some distinctions. There may be a crack in the floor in one of the units and everything else is fine in the other three. There may be a roof problem in one of the units that doesn't exist somewhere else. Whatever it might be that needs to be disclosed for that particular unit, that's how you're going to do it. As far as the SPQ, the same thing. While there may be commonality of answers to all of the different questions, there are going to be some unique questions. And so I believe that the best practice, and certainly on the Avid form, is to do one for each.
Nothing right now.
Nothing right now? Okay, let's see what else we have. Oh, yeah. I guess a couple of you have gotten dinged by CRMLS, and you want to know what you can do if you don't think that your fine was justified. Well, appeal. That's simple. If you're a member of Pacific West or Tri-Counties or one of the boards that my law firm represents, we've come up with a way that you can appeal without much risk. But don't waste your time, because it's going to cost you $100. So don't be filing frivolous claims, because it's going to cost you money either way. But if you've gotten a citation and you believe that it's inappropriate, you need to know why. And if you're really convinced that it's inappropriate, what you do is you request an appeal, and you can do it one of two ways. You can request a full-blown code of ethics violation hearing with all the bells and the whistles, and we'll give it to you. But keep in mind, what's going to happen is that citation is going to go over to the grievance committee, and they're going to see maybe we should add, if necessary, if appropriate, other code of ethics violations and or other MLS rules violations. We're going to then look and see if it should go to the professional standards people for a hearing. If that happens, then you are exposed to a fine far greater than the one that you got hit with. Obviously, you can be found not guilty, and that certainly does happen. In my view, the better way, and the way we've provided for you, and the way NAR has said is okay, is you can fill out a paper, and you're going to explain why you think the professionals over at CRMLS are wrong. And was it once a month, Lori? Once every couple of weeks, a group of professional standards people are going to get together and look at all those citations, and if they agree, they'll dismiss your case. If they don't agree, they'll impose the fine, and or they'll confirm the fine, I should say. And you're not at risk for any other penalty, and it costs you $100 to find out. So that's up to you, but there is an appeal process. But the better approach, it seems to me, read the rules. Get to know them. I used to teach a class. Thank goodness I don't have to do it anymore, because it got a little boring after a while. We used to lovingly refer to as the MLS Traffic School class. And in that class, we would go over all the rules that CRMLS now has available training for you to do. And it was amazing to me how little understanding the general membership public has of those MLS rules. It's 23 pages. Come on. Read it. Understand the rules. Figure out what it is you're supposed to do in the listing section. What status changes are you supposed to make, and when? What kind of advertising requirements? What about accuracy? All of the things that go into the process from beginning to end, and what it is that the MLS expects of you, and what is legal and what is not. Then ask questions if you're not sure. I've had brokerages that had legitimate questions about an interpretation. Ask questions, argue, make your case. But most, I'd say, the vast majority is because the agent simply didn't understand the rules. And so if you understand the rules, not only are you going to be able to protect yourself and your client, but you're going to be able to protect yourself from citations, and more importantly, from other agents that are trying to skewer the rules. How are we doing on time, Lori?
We're good on time. We're almost at an hour.
Okay.
I have a few other questions if you'd like to just
It's up to
finish
you.
up. Teams. I get a lot of questions on Teams.
Really? We get questions on Teams? That
All
hardly
the
ever
time.
happens, only every day.
Every day.
Now, teams have become enormous in terms of their number and their importance in the industry. I'm a member of a couple of teams, and I think teams are great. I think teams are great because you've got a gift mix. I'm a pretty good big picture guy. I hate the detail work. Other people love the detail work. They love those little dot the I's and cross the T kind of things. That's not my nature. I like mentoring young attorneys, and I'm been blessed with being able to do that because my team is made up of other people. Some of them pretty much everyone's much younger than me, but these people are brand new, and it's just a joy to work with them and their sense of ethics, their desire to do well. So it's a lot of fun. We all have different gifts and different information. I'm absolutely shocked at how many times I've been able to take an idea and get someone else on my team to come up with an even better idea, or to take my idea and take it to the next level, or me to take their idea and take it to the next level, or the group to bring it up. So teams are great. I love teams. I think teams can work very, very well in your business, but like everything else, they've got to be done correctly. And what are the things that we're seeing with teams? Well, Lori, I think that probably the biggest issue is who supervises the team. And so from that standpoint, you got to remember that if you're a team, a real team, you are a member of a brokerage, and there's still a supervising broker out there who is ultimately responsible for your supervision. So it's not the team leader, although the team leader will certainly have an input, but it's the brokerage. And the team leader cannot create rules that either go against the policies of the office or, more importantly, go against the code of ethics of the Department of Real Estate or state law requirements. And so, who's supervising that? Who are the employees of the team? A lot of teams have gotten pretty big where they actually have their own employees. Maybe the team has formed a corporation, and so we've got those people. Is the employee a transaction coordinator, someone who is a clerk? Are those people employees of the team, or are they joint employees of the brokerage? Very possibly both. You've got advertising issues. Is the team properly advertising itself? There's a whole section of Ashley's guidelines on the issue of teams. And so you need to take a look at that and see how you advertise your team name. We saw one situation not too long ago, if you remember, where the team said it was the #1 brokerage in its particular geographic area. It wasn't even a brokerage, it's a team. And that means it's part of a brokerage. So teams come up. We're going to, again, start covering that. Another thing, if you're the broker and you have a team, make sure they have a written agreement. You still are the broker. And I understand that sometimes these teams are very powerful. They provide you a lot of work and a lot of transactions. But at the end of the day, they're still your a responsibility. It's not too much to ask. CARs come up with a team contract. It can be used, it can be modified, however you want to do it. But if there's a dispute amongst that team, the brokerage is going to have to step in. And if it's about money, keep in mind that those commissions are ultimately the broker's commissions, and you're going to have to figure out how to make everybody happy or unhappy. Also, people come and go. Sometimes they'll leave a team. What happens to their money? What happens to their claims if they've been treated inappropriately because of the employment issues? So who's responsible for all that? So there's a whole myriad of issues. And at the end of the day, you need to be responsible as a team, as a broker for a team. So
That's all I have.
we're good. Has it been an hour?
It's been an hour,
My
maybe.
God, that's the fastest hour of my life. I want to thank you all. A couple of things before I go. Just want to make sure you're aware of some upcoming programs. I'm living the dream. On September the 9th, I get to do a class I've been wanting to do for a very long time. As some of you know, some of you have attended, I do an RPA class, and I'll continue to do it for the association. But I'm only a lawyer. No, people don't get in touch with me to tell me what a great transaction they had. I only hear the bad stuff. And so I've always wanted to do a class with another broker. And as you've probably gathered from some comments I've made, I have a tremendous respect for Barbara Betts as both a person and as a realtor. And Barbara and I are going to do a joint class on September the 9th. It's a full-day RPA class. It's basically the RPA class I've been doing, but we're going to share the podium, share the mic. That's going to be tough because both of us are chatty. But we did it in another association not too long ago, and it was some of the most fun I've ever had, and the responses were phenomenal from the membership. Because again, you're going to get a top-notch broker's perspective, you're going to get my perspective, and you're going to be able to make up your own mind. And the thing we were amazed at in this other class was we thought it would be primarily new people, but frankly, of the 80 or so people that came, actually a few more than that, and we didn't advertise it because we wanted to try and do it quietly to see how it would work. Most of the people were actually pretty experienced agents, and it turned into like a symposium kind of a give and take. So that's happening on September the 9th. On September the 12th, I'm going to do a brown bag. And as those of you who have attended know, they're pretty well attended. So we're going to, as we've been doing, we're going to do two because they sign up pretty quickly. We're going to do one at 10 o'clock. That'll go to noon. They're going to let me take an hour break, and then we're going to do another one at 1 o'clock, and that'll go to 3. So whichever one works best for your schedule. And again, if you've done a brown bag, they're a lot of fun. It's my favorite class, just because they're so much fun, because I never know what you guys are going to ask. In October, we're going to, on the 22nd in Long Beach, there's going to be a really fantastic general membership meeting. It's at the Marriott over by the airport. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the Marriott airport there on Spring. And I'm going to be part of an opening act. And it's going to be myself and Ed Zorn. And we're going to do a panel along with a DRE investigator. And that's going to be followed by a gentleman by the name of Terry Watson, who I understand is a phenomenal speaker. The next day, for the broker managers, we've put together another legal panel. And that panel is going to consist of Ed Zorn, who will answer any question you have on the MLS and the technology and all of that. I'm going to be there to answer any legal questions. And I've asked a friend of mine who is just a fabulous defense lawyer, does a lot of broker defense work, a guy named Scott Hansen, and Scott's going to be there to talk about defense issues and how to properly prepare your file and all those kinds of things. We're going to do another brown bag in November where we're going to talk about the new forms and all the laws and answer questions. That'll be, again, 10 o'clock to noon and 1 to 3. And then something we just started putting together, and I am so excited about it. One of your lobbyists is a gentleman by the name of Sanjay Waggle, and Sanjay is young, he's brilliant, and has done a tremendous amount of work under incredibly difficult circumstances up in Sacramento. And he's going to fly down on December the 5th, and we don't know how we're going to do it yet. Right now it's tentatively scheduled for the association, but we're trying to think about how we want to set it up to do sort of a year-end blockbuster. You know, what's going to happen for, you know, we're ending 2019, we're moving into 2020. It's going to be a lot of changes. Who should we bring in to talk about what happens on January the 1st, 2020? What do you need to be prepared for? Sanjay is going to talk about all the new laws, how they happened, how they ended up. Right now we know there's going to be rent control. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like. Still in the Senate. It's come out of Assembly. We're going to be talking about all that stuff, and Sanjay is going to give you a first-hand look at that. I'll be talking about what cases happened in 2019 that will affect you going forward and emerging issues and those things. And then, of course, whoever we have as the third panelist will talk about whatever we think might be of interest to you. So if you've got an idea, let us know. Let Lori know. Let me know. But we're really excited about that. Lori came up with the idea. It's going to be fantastic. I'm really excited about it. I'm looking forward, frankly, to learning a lot myself, particularly from Sanjay, because he's just absolutely a special kid to work with. So that's it for today. Let me know if you like this. We're going to still do the rants, whether they are going to be live, whether we're going to put them on Memorex. If we do that, of course, I'll pick the topic. But if we do it live, you pick the topic. I want to thank all of those of you that have sent in questions today, that sent in questions beforehand. I appreciate the questions ahead of time because it gives me a chance to think a little bit about them. But I really appreciate the way Lori monitored the questions as they were coming in. I want to give her a special shout out, Lori Smith, who is one of the two finest professional standards managers probably in the nation, along with Linda Conaway, who works in my office. I want to give a special shout out to Jay, who handles this incredible facility that you guys have, and is going to get me a cup, so I have my very own John Rants cup. And I want to just thank everybody here at Pacific West for allowing me to be your lawyer. It's been a real joy as we've gone over the years. So until next time, we'll see you down the road.